Hello, my name is Leo.
You're a braver man than me, Lannister. You do know the fate of our last two hands?
Not really sure how long you'll do this for, but...
If you mean to frighten me, why not say 4?
Plus Dauntless.
Littlefinger raised an eyebrow. Did the hands before Lord Arryn meet some dire end in the tower? I'm afraid I was too young to pay them much mind. Aerys Targaryen's last hand was killed during the sack of King's Landing, though I doubt he'd time to settle into the tower. He was only hand for a fortnight. The one before him was burned to death, and before them came 2 others who died landless and penniless in exile, and counted themselves lucky. I believe my Lord Father was the last hand to depart King's Landing with his name, properties, and parts all intact. Fascinating, said Littlefinger. And all the more reason I'd sooner bed down in a dungeon. Perhaps you'll get that wish, Tyrion thought, but he said, Courage and folly are cousins, or so I've heard. Whatever curse may linger over the Tower of the Hand, I pray I'm small enough to escape its notice. Janos Slynt laughed, Littlefinger smiled, and Grandmaster Pycelle followed them both out, bowing gravely. I hope Father did not send you all this way to plague us with history lessons, his sister said when they were alone. How I've yearned for the sound of your sweet voice. Tyrion sighed to her. How I have yearned to have that eunuch's tongue pulled out
Oh
with
yeah, you can hear it.
Cersei replied. Has Father lost senses?
Right.
Or did you forge this letter? She read it once more, with mounting annoyance. Why would he inflict you on me? I wanted him to come himself. She crushed Lord Tyrion's letter in her fingers. I am Joffrey's regent, and I sent him a royal command. And he ignored you, Tyrion pointed out. He has quite a large army, he can do that. Nor is he the first, is he? Cersei's mouth tightened. You could see her color rising. If I name this letter a forgery and tell them to throw you in a dungeon, no one will ignore that, I promise you. He was walking on rotten ice now, Tyrion knew. One false step and he would plunge through. No one, he agreed amiably. Least of all our father, the one with the army. But why should you want to throw me into a dungeon, sweet sister, when I've come all this way to help you? I do not require your help. It was our father's presence that I commanded.
I'm listening to the audiobook of Game of Thrones.
But it's Jaime.
In case you didn't realise. Well, actually, it's not Game of Thrones, it's Clash of Kings.
Subtle, but he'd grown up with her. He could read her face like one of his favorite books, and what he read now was rage and fear and despair. Jaime. Is my brother no less than yours? Tyrion interrupted. Give me your support and I promise you, we will have Jaime freed and returned to us unharmed.
Maybe I should do
How?
this.
Cersei
Yeah.
demanded. The Stark boy and his mother are not like to forget that we beheaded Lord Eddard.
If I put, because if I want to put this on YouTube,
Yet you still hold his daughters, don't you? I saw the older girl out in
what's
the
the name?
yard
Won't
with
like it.
Joffrey.
What's the name?
Sansa,
You two won't
Queen
like it.
said. I've given it out that I've the younger brat as well, but it's a lie. I sent Meryn Trant to take her in hand when
Oh
Robert
god,
died.
did the game crash?
Her wretched dancing master interfered and the girl fled. No one has seen her since. Likely she's dead. A great many people died that day. Tyrion had hoped for both Stark girls, but he supposed one would have to do. Tell me about our friends on the council. His sister glanced at the door. What of them? Father seems to have taken a dislike to them.
Crash, just
When I left him, he was wondering how their heads might look on a wall beside Lord Stark's. He leaned forward across the table. Are you certain of their loyalty? Do you trust them? I trust no one, Cersei snapped. I need them. Does Father believe they are playing us false? Suspects, rather. Why? What does he know? Tyrion shrugged. He knows that your son's short reign has been a long parade of follies and disasters. That suggests that someone is giving Joffrey some very bad counsel. Cersei gave him a searching look. Joff has had no lack of good counsel. He's always been strong-willed. Now that he's king, he believes he should do as he pleases, not as he's bid. Crowns do queer things to the heads beneath them, Tyrion agreed. The business with Eddard Stark. Joffrey's work? The Queen grimaced. He was instructed to pardon Stark to allow him to take the Black. the man would have been out of our way forever, and we might have made peace with that son of his. Joff took it upon himself to give the mob a better show. What was I to do? He called for Lord Eddard's head in front of half the city, and Janet Sling and Sir Ellen went ahead blithely and shortened the man without a word from me. Her hand tightened into a fist. The High Septon claims we profaned Balla's sept with blood, after lying to him about our intent. It would seem he has a point, said Tyrion. So, with Lord Slint, he was part of it, was he? Tell me, whose fine notion was it to grant him Harrenhal and name him to the council? Littlefinger made the arrangements. We needed Slint's gold cloaks. Eddard Stark was plotting with Renly and he'd written to Lord Stannis, offering him the throne. Huh? We might have lost all. Even so, it was a close thing. If Sansa hadn't come to me and told me all her father's plans... Tyrion was surprised. Truly? His own daughter? Sansa had always seemed such a sweet child, tender and courteous. The girl was wet with love. She would have done anything for Joffrey until he cut off her father's head and called it mercy. That put an end to that. His Grace has a unique way of winning the hearts of his subjects. Tyrion said with a crooked smile. Was it Joffrey's wish to dismiss Sir Barristan Selmy from his Kingsguard too? Cersei sighed. Joff wanted someone to blame for Robert's death. Varys suggested Sir Barristan. Why not? It gave Jaime command of the Kingsguard and a seat on a small council, and allowed Joff to throw a bone to his dog. He's very fond of Sender Clegane. We are prepared to offer Selmy some land in the Tower House, more than the useless old fool deserved. I heard that useless old fool slew 2 of Slint's gold cloaks when they tried to seize him at the Mud Gate. His sister looked very unhappy. Janis should have sent more men. He's not as competent as might be wished. Sir Barristan was the Lord Commander of Robert Baratheon's Kingsguard. Tyrion reminded her pointedly. He and Jaime are the only survivors of Aerys Targaryen's 7. The small folk talk of him in the same way they talk of Servant of the Mirror Shield and Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight. What do you imagine they'll think when they see Barristan the Bold riding beside Robb Stark or Stannis Baratheon? Cersei glanced away. I had not considered that. Father did, said Tyrion. That is why he sent me, to put an end to these follies and bring your son to heel. Joff will be no more tractable for you than for me. He might. Why should he? He knows you would never hurt him. Cersei's eyes narrowed. If you believe I'd ever allow you to harm my son, you're sick with fever. Tyrion sighed. She'd missed a point as she did so often. Joffrey is safe with me as he is with you, he assured her. But so long as the boy feels threatened, he'll be more inclined to listen. He took her hand. I'm your brother, you know. You need me, whether you care to admit it or no. Your son needs me, if he's to have a hope of retaining that ugly iron share. His sister seemed shocked that he would touch her. You have always been cunning. In my own small way. He grinned. It may be worth the trying, but make no mistake, Tyrion. If I accept you, you shall be the king's hand in name, but my hand in truth. You will share all your plans and intentions with me before you act, and you will do nothing without my consent. Do you understand? Oh, yes. Do you agree? Certainly, he lied. I'm yours, sister. For as long as I need to be. So, now that we are of one purpose, we ought to have no more secrets between us. You say Joffrey had Lord Eddard killed, Varys dismissed Sir Barristan, and Littlefinger gifted us with Lord Slint. Who murdered Jon Arryn? Cersei yanked her hand back. How should I know? The grieving widow in the Eyrie seems to think it was me. Where did you come by that notion, I wonder? I'm sure I don't know. That fool Eddard Stark accused me of the same thing. He hinted that Lord Arryn suspected, or, well, believed. That you were fucking our sweet Jaime? She slapped him. Did you think I was as blind as father? Tyrion rubbed his cheek. Who you lie with is no matter to me. Although it doesn't seem quite just that you should open your legs for one brother and not the other. She slapped him. Be gentle, Cersei. I'm only jesting with you. If truth be told, I'd sooner have a nice whore. I never understood what Jaime saw in you, apart from his own reflection. She slapped him. His cheeks were red and burning, yet he smiled. If you keep doing that, I may get angry. That stayed her hand. Why should I care if you do? I have some new friends, Tyrion confessed. You won't like them at all. How did you kill Robert? He did that himself. All we did was help. When Lancel saw that Robert was going off to Boar, he gave him strong wine. His favorite sour red, but fortified, 3 times as potent as he was used to. The great stinking fool loved it. He could have stopped swilling it down any time he cared to, but no. He drained one skin and told Lancel to fetch another. The boar did the rest. You should have been at the feast, Tyrion. There has never been a boar so delicious. They cooked it with mushrooms and apples, and it tasted like triumph. Truly, sister, you were born to be a widow. Tyrion had rather liked Robert Baratheon, great blustering oaf that he was, doubtless in part because his sister loathed him so. Now, if you're done slapping me, I will be off. He twisted his legs around and clambered down awkwardly from the chair. Cersei frowned. I haven't given you leave to depart. I want to know how you intend to free Jaime. I'll tell you when I know. Schemes are like fruit. They require a certain ripening. Right now, I have a mind to ride through the streets and take the measure of this city. Tyrion rested his hand on the head of the Sphinx beside the door. One parting request. Kindly make certain no harm comes to Sansa Stark. It would not do to lose both the daughters. Outside the council chamber, Tyrion nodded to Sir Mandon and made his way down the long vaulted hall. Bronn fell in beside him. Of Timett, son of Timett, there was no sign. Where's our right hand? Tyrion asked.
I'm gonna get something to eat. Yes, 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 this is what I want. Wait. What was it that you wanted? I wanted some Tim Tams.
You felt an urge to explore.
Tim Tams,
kind
baby!
was not made for waiting
Original
about
flavor,
in
no
halls.
less.
I hope he doesn't kill anyone important. The clansmen Tyrion had brought down from their fastnesses in the mountains of the moon were loyal in their own fierce way, but they were proud and quarrelsome as well, prone to answer insults real or imagined with steel. Try to find him, and while you are at it, see that the rest have been quartered and fed. I want them in the barracks beneath the Tower of the Hand, but don't let the steward put his stone crows near the Moon Brothers, and tell him the burnt men must have a hall all to themselves. Where will you be? I'm riding back to Broken Anvil. Bronn grinned insolently. Need an escort? The talk is the streets are dangerous. I'll call upon the captain of my sister's household guard, and remind him that I'm no less a Lannister than she is. He needs to recall that his oath is to Casterly Rock, not to Cersei or Joffrey. An hour later, Tyrion rode from the Red Keep, accompanied by a dozen Lannister guardsmen in crimson cloaks and lion-crested half-helms. As they passed beneath the portcullis, he noted the hats mounted atop the walls. Black with rot and old tar, they had long since become unrecognizable. Captain Viller, he called. I want those taken down on the morrow. Give them to the Silent Sisters for cleaning. It would be hell to match them with the bodies, he supposed, yet it must be done. Even in the midst of war, certain decencies needed to be observed. Viller grew hesitant. His Grace has told us he wishes the traitors' heads to remain on the walls until he fills those last 3 empty spikes there on the end. Let me hazard a wild staff. One is for Robb Stark, the other's for Lord Stannis and Renly. Would that be right? Yes, my lord. My nephew is 13 years old today, Viller. Try and recall that. I'll have the heads down on the morrow, or one of those empty spikes may have a different logic. Do you take my meaning, Captain? I'll see that they're taken down myself, my lord. Good. Tyrion put his heels into his horse and trotted away, leaving the red cloaks to follow as best they could. He had told Cersei he intended to take the measure of the city. That was not entirely a lie. Tyrion Lannister was not pleased by much of what he saw. The streets of King's Landing had always been teeming and raucous and noisy, but now they reeked of danger in a way that he did not recall from past visits. A naked corpse sprawled in the gutter near the Street of Looms, being torn at by a pack of feral dogs, yet no one seemed to care. Watchmen were much in evidence, moving in pairs through the alleys in their gold cloaks and shirts of black ringmail, iron cudgels never far from their hands. The markets were crowded with ragged men selling their household goods for any price they could get, and conspicuously empty of farmers selling food. What little produce he did see was 3 times as costly as it had been a year ago. One peddler was hawking rats roasted on a skewer. "Fresh rats!" he cried loudly. Doubtless fresh rats were to be preferred to old stale rotten rats. The frightening thing was, the rats looked more appetizing than most of what the butchers were selling. On the Street of Flour, Tyrion saw guards at every other shop door. When times grew lean, even bakers found sellswords cheaper than bread, he reflected. "There is no food coming in, is there?" he said to Villar. "Little enough," the captain admitted. "With the war in the Riverlands and Lord Renly raising rebels in High Garden, the roads are closed to south and west." "And what has my good sister done about this?" "She is taking steps to restore the king's peace," Villar assured him. "Lord Slint has tripled the size of the city watch, and the queen has put 1,000 craftsmen to work on our..."
水曜日はピザ3枚を
fucking
2400
ads.
円でお届け。ようやく週の半分
Fuck.
20
Well, I
種
can't
類
do
から
anything
選
about
べ
that.
て M ピザ3枚2400円。水曜くらい楽しよう。
Ads
水
for
曜日は
Domino's
ピザ
Pizza.
3枚を2400円でお届け。ドミノピザ。
Hey guys, it's Snow here.
Oh my god, this has 3 minutes!
This is small too, but it's welcome anyway. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a like.
Oh my fucking
If
Christ.
you want to, it's free and you can always change your mind later. Today we're going to be opening Pokemon card packs.
Oh my god.
This one is
Why is this an ad?
Darkness Ablaze.
I hate these fucking YouTube ads.
And yeah, let's just jump on into it.
Oh my god.
Yay! Cards opening. So much fun. Okay, go. And then, trying to see what the easiest way of opening this is. Here we go. Opening. There we go. All the goodies are in there. Okay. And then just gonna. Okay. For all the people at home. There you go. Alright. And then we're going to do 1, 2, 3 to the front. Throw away the energy card. We don't need that right now.
Oh my fucking god, I can't believe I'm
And
watching a
then
Pokemon
flip it
card
over.
opening
Come back
ad on
in.
YouTube.
Cupid card? What is that? How do you say that? I believe, I think. Corvusquire? Cassinet? Looks like a very angry monkey. Fletchling, Doorball, Wimpod, Grimer, Clink, a reverse hollow Simisear. That's pretty cool. This might be worth a little bit, not much. The price will be on the screen here in 3, 2, 1. There we go. And then, oh, a holographic Argon. Agron. Agron? Yeah. That's gonna be worth a little bit more than this one, because holographics just look so much more better than reverse hollows, and they're a little bit more rare to come by. So I got a pretty decent deck here. This price will be on the screen right here. So let's go ahead and put that. Yep. Alrighty. So that's cool. Okay. Well, that was fun. I'll do more of these pack openings if you liked it. If you did like it, go ahead and do leave a like. If you didn't like it, hopefully you did, you can always leave a unlike and go ahead and subscribe.
In our defenses, the stonemasons are strengthening the walls, carpenters are building scorpions and catapults by the hundred, fletchers are making arrows, the smiths are forging blades, and the alchemist's guild has pledged 10,000 jars of wildfire. Tyrion shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. He was pleased that Cersei had not been idle, but wildfire was treacherous stuff, and 10,000 jars were enough to turn all of King's Landing into cinders. Where has my sister found the coin to pay for all of this? It was no secret that King Robert had left the crown vastly in debt, and alchemists were seldom mistaken for altruists. Lord Littlefinger always finds a way, my lord. He has imposed a tax on those wishing to enter the city. Yes, that will work, Tyrion said, thinking. Clever. Clever and cruel. Tens of thousands had fled to fighting for the supposed safety of King's Landing. He had seen them on the King's Road, troops of mothers and children and anxious fathers who had gazed on his horses and wagons with covetous eyes. Once they reached the city, they would doubtless pay over all they had to put those high comforting walls between them and the war, though they might think twice if they knew about the wildfire. The inn beneath the sign of the Broken Anvil stood within sight of those walls, near the gate of the guards where they had entered that morning. As they rode into its courtyard, a boy ran out to help Tyrion down from his horse. Take your men back to the castle, he told Villar. I'll be spending the night here. The captain looked dubious. Will you be safe, my lord? Well, as to that, Captain. When I left the inn this morning, it was full of Black Ears. One is never quite safe when Chella, daughter of Chaig, is about. Tyrion waddled toward the door, leaving Villar to puzzle at his meaning. A gust of merriment greeted him as he shoved into the inn's common room. He recognized Chella's throaty chuckle and delighted music of Shay's laughter. The girl was seated by the hearth, sipping wine at a round wooden table with 3 of the Black Ears he'd left to guard her, and a plump man whose back was to him. The innkeeper, he assumed, until Shay called Tyrion by name and the intruder rose. My good lord, I'm so pleased to see you, he gushed, a soft eunuch smile on his powdered face. Tyrion stumbled. Lord Varys, I had not thought to see you here. The others take him. How did he find them so quickly? Forgive me if I intrude, Varys said. I was taken by a sudden urge to meet your young lady. Young lady, Shay repeated, savoring the words. You're half right, my lord. I am young. 18, Tyrion thought. 18 and a whore, but quick of wit, nimble as a cat between the sheets, with large dark eyes and fine black hair, and a sweet, soft, hungry little mouth. And mine. Damn you, eunuch. I fear I'm the intruder, Lord Varys, he said with forced courtesy. When I came in, you were in the midst of some merriment. My Lord Varys complimented Chella on her ears, and said she must have killed many men to have such a fine necklace, Shay explained. It grated on him to hear her call Varys my lord in that tone. That was what she called him in their pillow play. And Chella told him only cowards kill the vanquished. Braver to learn the man alive with a chance to cleanse his shame by winning back his ear, exclaimed Chella, a small dark woman whose grisly neckwear was hung with no less than 46 dried, wrinkled ears. Tyrion had counted them once. Only so can you prove you do not fear your enemies. Shay hooted. And then my lord says if he was a Black Ear he'd never sleep, for dreams of one-eared men. A problem I will never need face, Tyrion said. I'm terrified of my enemies, so I kill them all. Varys giggled. Will you take some wine with us, my lord?
Does it have to be these ones?
I'll take some wine. Tyrion
Ugh.
seated himself beside Shay. He understood what was happening here, if Challa and the girl did not. Varys was delivering a message. When he said, I was taken by a sudden urge to meet your young lady, what he meant was, you tried to hide her, but I knew where she was, and who she was, and here I am. He wondered who had betrayed him. The innkeeper, that boy in the stable, a guard on the gate, or one of his own. I always like to return to the city through the gate of the gods, Varys told Shay as he filled the wine cups. The carvings on the gatehouse are exquisite. They make me weep each time I see them. The eyes, so expressive, don't you think? They almost seem to follow you as you ride beneath the portcullis. I never noticed, my lord, Shay replied. I'll look again on the morrow if it please you. Don't bother, sweetling, Tyrion thought, swirling the wine in the cup. He cares not a whit about carvings. The eyes he boasts of are his own. What he means is that he was watching, that he knew we were here the moment we passed through the gates. Do be careful, child, Varys urged. King's Landing is not wholly safe these days. I know these streets well, and yet I almost feared to come today, alone and unarmed as I was. Lawless men are everywhere in this dark time, oh yes. Men with cold steel and colder hearts. Where I can come alone and unarmed, others can come with swords in their fists, he was saying. Shay only laughed. If they try and bother me, they'll be one ear short when Challa runs them off. Varys hooted as if it was the funniest thing he had ever heard, but there was no laughter in his eyes when he turned them on Tyrion. Your young lady has an amiable way to her. I should take very good care of her if I were you. I intend to. Any man who tries to harm her, well, I'm too small to be a black ear, and I make no claims to courage. See? I speak the same tongue you do, eunuch. Hurt her, and I'll leave your head. I will leave you. Varys rose. I know how weary you must be. I only wish to welcome you, my lord, and tell you how very pleased I am by your arrival. We have dire need of you on the council. Have you seen the comet? I'm short, not blind, Tyrion said. Out in the King's Road it had seemed to cover half the sky, outshining the crescent moon. In the streets they call it the Red Messenger, Varys said. They say it comes as a herald before a king, to warn of fire and blood to follow. The eunuch rubbed his powdered hands together. May I leave you with a bit of a riddle, Lord Tyrion? He did not wait for an answer. In a room sit 3 grave men, a king, a priest, and a rich man with his gold. Between them stands a sell sword, a little man of common birth and no great mind. Each of the great ones bids him slay the other 2. Do it, says the king, for I'm your lawful ruler. Do it, says the priest, for I command you in the names of the gods. Do it, says the rich man, and all this gold shall be yours. So tell me, who lives and who dies? Bowing deeply, the eunuch hurried from the common room on soft, slippered feet. When he was gone, Challa gave a snort and Shay wrinkled up her pretty face. The rich man lives, doesn't he? Tyrion sipped at his wine, thoughtful. Perhaps, or not. That would depend on the sellsword, it seems. He set down his cup. Come, let's go upstairs. She had to wait for him at the top of the steps, for her legs were slim and supple, while his were short and stunted and full of aches. But she was smiling when he reached her. Did you miss me? She teased as she took his hand. Desperately, Tyrion admitted. Shay only stood a shade over 5 feet, yet still he must look up to her. But in her case, he found he did not mind. She was sweet to look up at. You'll miss me all the time in your red keep, she said as she led him to her room. All alone in your cold bed in your Tower of the Hand. Too true. Tyrion would gladly have kept her with him, but his lord father had forbidden it. You will not take the whore to court, Lord Tywin had commanded. Bringing her to the city was as much defiance as he dared. All his authority derived from his father, the girl had to understand that. You won't be far, he promised. You'll have a house with guards and servants, and I'll visit as often as I'm able. Shay kicked shut the door. Through the cloudy panes of the narrow window, he could make out the great sept of Bala crowning Visenia's hill, but Tyrion was distracted by a different sight. Bending, Shay took her gown by the hem, drew it over her head, and tossed it aside. She did not believe in small clothes. "You'll never be able to rest," she said as she stood before him, pink and nude and lovely, one hand braced on her hip. "You'll think of me every time you go to bed. Then you'll get hard and you'll have no one to help you, and you'll never be able to sleep unless you—" She grinned that wicked grin Tyrion liked so well. "Is that why they call it the Tower of the Hen, my lord?" "Be quiet and kiss me," he commanded. He could taste the wine on her lips and feel her small, firm breasts pressed against him as her fingers moved to the lacings of his breeches. "My lion," she whispered when he broke off the kiss to undress. "My sweet lord, my giant of Lannister." Tyrion pushed her toward the bed. When he entered her, she screamed loud enough to wake Balor the Blessed in his tomb, and her nails left gouges in his back. He'd never had a pain he liked half so well. "Fool," he thought to himself afterward, as they lay in the center of the sagging mattress amidst the rumpled sheets. "Will you never learn, dwarf? She's a whore, damn you. It's your coin she loves, not your cock. Remember Tisha?" Yet when his fingers trailed lightly over one nipple, it stiffened at the touch, and he could see the mark on her breast where he'd bitten her in passion. "So what will you do, my lord, now that you're the hand of the king?" Shay asked him as he cupped that warm, sweet flesh. "Something Cersei will never expect," Tyrion murmured softly against her slender neck. "I'll do justice." Chapter 4. Bran. Bran preferred the hard stone of the window seat to the comforts of his feather bed and blankets. A bed, the walls pressed close and the ceiling hung heavy above him. A bed, the room was his cell, and Winterfell his prison. Yet outside his window, the wide world still called. He could not walk, nor climb, nor hunt, nor fight with a wooden sword as once he had, but he could still look. He liked to watch the windows begin to glow all over Winterfell, as candles and hearth fires were lit behind the diamond-shaped panes of tower and hall, and he loved to listen to the dire wolves sing to the stars. Of late, he often dreamed of wolves. "They are talking to me, brother to brother," he told himself when the dire wolves howled. He could almost understand them. Not quite, not truly, but almost. As if they were singing in a language he had once known and somehow forgotten. The Walders might be scared of them, but the Starks had wolf blood. Old men told him so. "Though it is stronger in some than in others," she warned. Summer's howls were long and sad, full of grief and longing. Shaggy dogs were more savage. Their voices echoed to the yards and halls until the castle rang, and it seemed as though some great pack of dire wolves haunted Winterfell, instead of only two. Two where there had once been 6. Do they miss their brothers and sisters too? Bran wondered. Are they calling to Grey Wind and Ghost, to Nymeria and Lady Shay? Do they want them to come home and be a pack together? "Who can know the mind of a wolf?" Sir Roderick Castle said when Bran asked him why they howled. Bran's lady mother had named him Castellan of Winterfell in her absence, and his duties left him little time for idle questions. "It's freedom they're calling for," declared Farlan, who was kennel master and had no more love for the dire wolves than his hound did. "They don't like being walled up, and who's to blame them? Wild things belong in the wild, not in a castle." "They want to hunt," agreed.
住まい探しに迷っているあなた、物件数No.1のスーモなら物件の写真がイメージ膨らむからぴったり。
見つけた。
住まい探しはスーモ
リクルート。唾液を取って送るだけ。自宅にいながらがんのリスクを調べる方法が話題。その方法とは夕暮れなマイヘルスの遺伝子解析サービス。遺伝子解析なんか聞いたことあるけど値段が高そうだし検査も大変そう。そう思ったあなたに嬉しいお知らせです。この遺伝子解析サービスはとても簡単でしかもお得なキャンペーン中。まずどれだけ簡単かというと遺伝子解析サービスに申し込み郵送されてくるキットで唾液を採取。唾液を同意書と一緒に返送したらウェブ上で解析結果を確認する。 このたった4ステップで自分の遺伝的傾向を把握することができるんです。遺伝子解析サービスでは三大疾病をはじめとした様々な健康リスク、アルコールへの依存のしやすさや肌のバリア機能などの体質、忍耐力などの性格に加え、祖先のルーツに至るまで本当に様々な興味深い項目の遺伝的傾向を調べることができます。その数なんと300項目以上。その中でもやはり注目したいのは健康リスクに関する遺伝的傾向、様々な病気に関す
Shut
る遺
that
伝
fucking ad up.
agreed Gage to cook as he tossed
annoying.
cubes of suet in a great kettle of stew. A wolf smells better than any man. Like as not, they've caught the scent of prey. Master Lewin did not think so. Wolves often howl at the moon. These are howling at the comet. See how bright it is, Bran? Perchance they think it is the moon. When Bran repeated that to Osha, she laughed aloud. Your wolves have more wit than your master, the wildling woman said. They know truths the grey man has forgotten. The way she said it made him shiver, and when he asked what the comet meant, she answered, Blood and fire, boy, and nothing sweet. Bran asked Septon Shale about the comet while they were sorting through some scrolls snatched from the library fire. It is the sword that slays the season, he replied, and soon after the White Raven came from Old Town, bringing word of autumn, so doubtless he was right. The old man did not think so, and she'd lived longer than any of them. Dragons, she said, lifting her head and sniffing. She was near blind and could not see the comet, yet she claimed she could smell it. It be dragons, boy, she insisted. Bran got no princess from them, no more than he ever did. Hodor said only, Hodor. That was all he ever said. And still the direwolves howled. The guards on the walls muttered curses. Hounds in the kennels barked furiously. Horses kicked at their stalls. The warders shivered by their fire, and even Master Lewin complained of sleepless nights. Only Bran did not mind. Sir Roderick had confined the wolves to the guardwood after Shaggy Dog with Little Walder. The stones of Winterfell played queer tricks with sound, and sometimes it sounded as if they were in the yard right below Bran's window. Other times he would have sworn they were up on the curtained walls, loping around like sentries. He wished that he could see them. He could see the comet hanging above the guard's hall and the bell tower, and farther back the first keep, squat and round, its goggles black shapes against the bruised purple dusk. Once, Bran had known every stone of those buildings, inside and out. He had climbed them all, scampering up walls as easily as the other boys ran downstairs. Their rooftops had been his secret places, and the crows atop the broken tower his special friends. And then he had fallen. Bran did not remember falling, yet they said he had, so he supposed it must be true. He had almost died. When he saw the weather-worn goggles atop the first keep where it had happened, he got a queer, tight feeling in his belly. And now he could not climb, nor walk, nor run, nor sword fight, and the dreams he'd dreamed of knighthood had soured in his head. Summer had howled the day Bran had fallen, and for long after as he lay broken in his bed. Robb had told him so before he went away to war.
What news from the
Summer had
frontier?
mourned for him, and Shaggy Dog and Grey Wind had joined in his grief. At the night the bloody raven had brought word of their father's death. The wolves had known that too.
The blades mean
Bran had been in the master's turret with Rickon, talking of the children of the forest, when Summer and Shaggy Dog had drowned out Lewin with their howls. Who are they mourning now? Had some enemy slain the king in the north, who used to be his brother Robb? Had his bastard brother Jon Snow fallen from the wall? Had his mother died, or one of his sisters? Or was this something else, as Master and Septon and Old Nan seemed to think? If I were truly a dire wolf, I would understand the song, he thought wistfully. In his wolf dreams, he could race up the sides of mountains, jagged icy mountains taller than any tower, and stand at the summit beneath the full moon, with all the world below him, the way it used to be. Ooh! Bran cried tentatively. He cupped his hands around his mouth and lifted his head to the comet. Woo! He howled. It sounded stupid, high and hollow and quavering, a little boy's howl, not a wolf's. Yet Summer gave answer, his deep voice drowning out Bran's thin one, and Shaggy Dog made it a chorus. Bran hurrooed again. They howled together, last of their pack. The noise brought a guard to his door, Hayhad with the wen on his nose. He peered in, saw Bran howling out the window and said, "What's this, my prince?" It made Bran feel queer when they called him prince, though he was Rob's heir, and Rob was king in an oath now. He turned his head to howl at the guard. Hayhad screwed up his face. "Now you stop that there." Ooh! The guardsman retreated. When he came back, Master Lewin was with him, all in grey, his chain tight about his neck. "Bran, those beasts make sufficient noise without your help." He crossed the room and put his hand on the boy's brow. "The hour grows late. You ought to be fast asleep." "I'm talking to the wolves." Bran brushed the hand away. "Shall I have Hayhad carry you to your bed?" "I can go to bed myself." Micken had hammered a row of iron bars into the wall, so Bran could pull himself about the room with his arms. It was slow and hard, and it made his shoulders ache, but he hated being carried. "Anyway, I don't have to sleep if I don't want to." "All men must sleep, Bran, even princes." "When I sleep, I turn into a wolf." Bran turned his face away and looked back out into the night. "Do wolves dream?" "All creatures dream, I think, yet not as men do." "Do dead men dream?" Bran asked, thinking of his father. In the dark crypts below Winterfell, a stone mason was chiseling out his father's likeness in granite. "Some say yes, some say no," the master answered. "The dead themselves are silent on the matter." "Do trees dream?" "Trees? No." "They do," Bran said with sudden certainty. "They dream tree dreams. I dream of a tree sometimes. A weirwood, like the one in the Godswood. It calls to me. The wolf dreams are better. I smell things, and sometimes I can taste the blood." Master Lewin tugged at his chain where it shaved his neck. "If you would only spend more time with the other children." "I hate the other children," Bran said, meaning the Walders. "I commanded you to send them away." Lewin grew stern. "The Freys are your lady mother's ward, sent here to be fostered at her express command. It is not for you to expel them, nor is it kind. If we turned them out, where would they go?" "Home. It's their fault you won't let me have summer." "The Frey boy did not ask to be attacked," the master said. "No more than I did." "That was Shaggy Dog." Rickon's big black wolf was so wild he even frightened Bran at times. "Summer never bit anyone." "Summer ripped out a man's throat in this very chamber, or have you forgotten? The truth is, those sweet pups you and your brothers found in the snow have grown into dangerous beasts. The Frey boys are wise to be wary of them." "We should put the Walders in the Godswood. They could play Lord of the Crossing all they want, and Summer could sleep with me again. If I'm the prince, why won't you heed me? I wanted to ride Dancer, but Alabelly wouldn't let me pass the gate." "And rightly so. The Wolfswood is full of danger. Your last ride should have told you that. Would you want some outlaw to take you captive and sell you to the Lannisters?" "Summer would save me," Bran insisted stubbornly. "Princes should be allowed to sail the sea and hunt boar in the Wolfswood and joust with lances." "Bran, child, why do you torment yourself so? One day you may do some of these things, but now you're only a boy of 8. "I'd sooner be a wolf. Then I could live in the wood and sleep when I wanted, and I could find Arya and Sansa. I'd smell where they were and go save them, and when Robb went to battle, I'd fight beside him like Greywind. I'd tear out the Kingslayer's throat with my teeth, rip, and then the war would be over and everyone would come back to Winterfell. If I was a wolf..." He howled. Lewin raised his voice. "A true prince would welcome..." "Ow!" Bran howled louder. The master surrendered. "As you will, child." With a look that was part grief and part disgust, he left the bedchamber. Howling lost its savor once Bran was alone. After a time, he quieted. "I did welcome them," he told himself, resentful. "I was the lord in Winterfell, a true lord. He can't say I wasn't. When the Walders had arrived from the twins, it had been Rickon who wanted them gone. A baby of 4, he had screamed that he wanted mother and father and Rob, not these strangers. It had been up to Bran to soothe him and bid the Freys welcome. He had offered them meat and mead, and a seat by the fire, and even Master Luwin had said afterward that he'd done well. Only that was before the game. The game was played with a log, a staff, a body of water, and a great deal of shouting. The water was the most important, Walder and Walder assured Bran. You could use a plank or even a series of stones, and a branch could be your staff. You didn't have to shout, but without water there was no game. As Master Luwin and Sir Roderick were not about to let the children go wandering off into the Wolfswood in search of a stream, they made do with one of the murky pools in the Godswood. Walder and Walder had never seen hot water bubbling from the ground before, but they both allowed how it would make the game even better. Both of them were called Walder Frey. Big Walder said there were bunches of Walders at the Twins, all named after the boy's grandfather, Lord Walder Frey. "We have our own names at Winterfell," Rickon told them haughtily when he heard that. The way their game was played, you laid the log across the water, and one player stood in the middle with a stick. He was the Lord of the Crossing, and when one of the other players came up, he had to say, "I'm the Lord of the Crossing, who goes there?" And the other player had to make up a speech about who they were and why they should be allowed to cross. The Lord could make them swear oaths and answer questions. They didn't have to tell the truth, but the oaths were binding unless they said, "Maypaps," so the tricks was to say mayhaps so the Lord of the Crossing didn't notice. Then you could try and knock the Lord into the water, and you got to be Lord of the Crossing, but only if you'd said mayhaps. Otherwise you were out of the game. The Lord got to knock anyone in the water anytime he pleased, and he was the only one who got to use a stick. In practice, the game seemed to come down to mostly shoving, hitting, and falling into the water, along with a lot of loud arguments about whether or not someone had said mayhaps. Little Walder was Lord of the Crossing more often than not. He was Little Walder even though he was tall and stout, with a red face and a big round belly. Big Walder was sharp-faced and skinny and half a foot shorter. "He's 52 days older than me," Little Walder explained. "So he was bigger at first, but I grew faster. We're cousins, not brothers."
リモートワーク、それは人類の働き方の進化系だが、飽くなき効率への追求は彼に息つく暇さえ与えさせない。一息つきたい。今一息つきたい。息が、頭がすごくモヤモヤする。
どちらさん？
すっきりしたいでしょ。
すっきり。
秒速息リフレッシュ。フリスククリーンブレス。スメスミント新登場。
Added Big Walder, the little one. "I'm Walder, son of Jamus. My father was Lord Walder's son by his 4th wife. He's Walder, son of Merritt. His grandmother was Lord Walder's 3rd wife, the Craycall. He's ahead of me in the line of succession, even though I'm older." "Only by 52 days," Little Walder objected. "And neither of us will ever hold the Twins, stupid." "I will," Big Walder declared. "We're not the only Walders either. So Stavron has a grandson, Black Walder. He's 4th in line of succession, and there's Red Walder, Sir Amon's son, and Bastard Walder, who isn't in the line at all. He's called Walder Rivers, not Walder Frey. Plus there is a girl named Walder. And Tyr, you always forget Tyr. He's Wolf Tyr, not Walder," Big Walder said airily. "And he's after us, so he doesn't matter. Anyhow, I never liked him." Sir Roderick decreed that they would share Jon Snow's old bedchamber, since Jon was in a night's watch and never coming back. Bran hated that. It made him feel as if the Freys were trying to steal Jon's place. He had watched wistfully while the Walders contested with Turnip, the cook's boy, and Jotheth's girl Bandy and Shira. The Walders had decreed that Bran should be the judge and decide whether or not people had said mayhaps, but as soon as they started playing, they forgot all about him. The shouts and splashes soon drew others. Palla, the kennel girl, Kane's boy, Callan, Tom too, whose father Fat Tom had died with Bran's father at King's Landing. Before very long, every one of them was soaked and muddy. Palla was brown from head to heel, with moss in her hair, breathless from laughter. Bran had not heard so much laughing since the night the bloody raven came. If I had my legs, I'd knock all of them into the water, he thought bitterly. No one would ever be Lord of the Crossing but me. Finally Rickon came running into the guardswood, Shaggy Dog at his heels. He watched Turnip and little Walder struggle for the stick until Turnip lost his footing and went in with a huge splash, arms waving. Rickon yelled, Me now, I want to play. Little Walder beckoned him on and Shaggy Dog started to follow. No, Shaggy, his brother commanded. Wolves can play, you stay with Bran. And he did, until little Walder had smacked Rickon with the stick, square across his belly. Before Bran could blink, the black wolf was flying over the plank. There was blood in the water, the Walders were shrieking red murder. Rickon sat in the mud laughing, and Hoder came lumbering in, shouting, Hoder, Hoder! After that, oddly, Rickon decided he liked the Walders. They never played Lord of the Crossing again, but they played other games. Monsters and maidens, rats and cats, come into my castle, all sort of things. With Rickon by their side, the Walders plundered the kitchens for pies and honeycombs, raced round the walls, tossed bones to the pups in the kennels, and trained with wooden swords under Sir Roderick's sharp eye. Rickon even showed them the deep vaults under the earth, where the stone mason was carving Father's tomb. You had no right! Bran screamed at his brother when he heard. That was our place, a Stark place. But Rickon never cared. The door to his bed chamber opened. Master Luwin was carrying a green jar, and this time Osher and Hayhat came with him. I've made you a sleeping draught, Bran. Osher scooped him up in her bony arms. She was very tall for a woman and very strong. She bore him effortlessly to his bed. This will give you dreamless sleep, Master Luwin said as he pulled the stopper from the jar. Sweet, dreamless sleep. It will? Bran said, wanting to believe. Yes, drink. Bran drank. The potion was thick and chalky, but there was honey in it, so it went down easy. Come the morn, you will feel better. Luwin gave Bran a smile and pat as he took his leave. Osher lingered behind. Is it the wolf dreams again? Bran nodded. You should not fight so hard, boy. I see you talking to the hard tree. Might be the gods are trying to talk back. The gods? He murmured, drowsy already. Osher's face grew blurry and grey. Sweet, dreamless sleep, Bran thought. Yet when the darkness closed over him, he found himself in the guardswood, moving silently beneath green-grey sentinels and gnarled oaks as old as time. I'm walking, he thought, exulting. Part of him knew that it was only a dream, but even the dream of walking was better than the truth of his bed chamber, walls and ceiling and door. It was dark amongst the trees, but the comet lit his way, and his feet were sure. He was moving on 4 good legs, strong and swift, and he could feel the ground underfoot, the soft crackling of fallen leaves, thick roots and hard stones, the deep layers of humus. It was a good feeling. The smells filled his head, alive and intoxicating. The green muddy stink of the hot pools, the perfume of rich rotting earth beneath his paws, the squirrels in the oaks. The scent of squirrel made him remember the taste of hot blood and the way the bones would crack between his teeth. Slaver filled his mouth. He had eaten no more than half a day past, but there was no joy in that meat, even deer. He could hear the squirrels chittering and rustling above him, safe among their leaves, but they knew better than to come down to where his brother and he were prowling. He could smell his brother too, a familiar scent, strong and earthy, his scent as black as his coat. His brother was loping around the walls, full of fury. Round and round he went, night after day after night, tireless, searching. For prey, for a way out, for his mother, his littermates, his pack. Searching, searching, and never finding. Behind the trees the walls rose, piles of dead men rocked that loomed all about this speck of living wood. Speckled grey they rose, and moss-spotted, yet thick and strong and higher than any wolf could hope to leap. Cold iron and splintery wood closed off the only holes through the piled stone that hemmed them in. His brother would stop at every hole and bare his fangs in rage, but the way stayed close. He had done the same the first night, and learned that it was no good. Snarls would open no paths here. Circling the walls would not push them back. Lifting a leg and marking the trees would keep no man away. The world had tightened around them, but beyond the walled woods still stood the great grey caves of Man Rock. Winterfell, he remembered, the sound coming to him suddenly. Beyond its sky-tall man cliffs, the true world was calling, and he knew he must answer or die. Chapter 5. Arya.
Thank you for your
They
patience.
travelled dawn to dusk, past woods and orchards and neatly tended fields, through small villages, crowded market towns, and stout holdfasts. Come dark, they would make camp and eat by the light of the red sword. The men took turns standing watch. Arya would glimpse firelight flickering through the trees from the camps of other travellers. There seemed to be more camps every night, and more traffic on the King's Road by day. Morn, noon and night they came, old folks and little children, big men and small ones, barefoot girls and women with babes at their breasts. Some drove farm wagons or bumped along in the back of ox carts. More rode draft horses, ponies,
Back
mules,
from
donkeys,
slaying, are you?
anything that would walk or run or roll. One woman led a milk cow with a little girl on its back. Arya saw a smith pushing a wheelbarrow with his tools inside, hammers and tongs and even an anvil, and a little while later a different man with a different wheelbarrow, only inside this one were two babes in a blanket. Most came on foot, with their goods on their shoulders and weary, weary looks upon their faces. They walked south toward the city, toward King's Landing, and only 1 in 100 spared so much as a word for Yoren and his charges, travelling north. She wondered why no one else was going the same way as them. Many of the travellers were armed. Arya saw daggers and dirks, scythes and axes, and here and there a sword. Some had made clubs from tree limbs or carved knobby staffs. They fingered their weapons and gave lingering looks at the wagons as they rolled by, yet in the end they let their column pass. 30 was too many, no matter what they had in those wagons. Look with your eyes, Sirio had said. Listen with your ears. One day, a mad woman began to scream at them from the side of the road. Fools! They'll kill you, fools! She was scarecrow thin, with hollow eyes and bloody feet. The next morning, a sleek merchant on a grey mare reined up by Yoren and offered to buy his wagons and everything in them for a quarter of their worth. It's war. They'll take what they want. You'll do better selling to me, my friend. Yoren turned away with a twist of his crooked shoulders and spat. Arya noticed the first grave that same day, a small mound beside the road, dug for a child. A crystal had been set in the soft earth, and Lummy wanted to take it until the bull told him he'd better leave the dead alone. A few leagues farther on, Pratt pointed out more graves, a whole row freshly dug. After that, a day hardly passed without one. One time Arya woke in the dark, frightened for no reason she could name. Above, the red sword shared the sky with 1,000 stars. The night seemed oddly quiet to her, though she could hear Yoren's muttered snores, the crackle of the fire, even the muffled stirrings of the donkeys. Yet somehow it felt as though the world were holding its breath, and the silence made her shiver. She went back to sleep, clutching needle. Come morning, when Pratt did not awaken, Arya realized that it had been his coughing she had missed. They dug a grave of their own then, burying the sellsword where he'd slept. Yoren stripped him of his valuables before they threw the dirt on him. One man claimed his boots, another his dagger. His mail shirt and helm were parcelled out. His longsword Yoren handed to the bull. Arms like yours might be you can learn to use this, he told him. A boy called Taba tossed a handful of acorns on top of Prate's body, so an oak might grow to mark his place. That evening they stopped in a village at an ivy-covered inn. Yoren counted the coins in his purse and decided they had enough for a hot meal. We'll sleep outside, same as ever, but they got a bathhouse here if any of you feels the need of hot water and a lick of soap. Arya did not dare, even though she smelled as bad as Yoren by now, all sour and stinky. Some of the creatures living in her clothes had come all the way from Flea Bottom with her. It didn't seem right to drown them. Taba and Hot Pie and the Bull joined the line of men headed for the tubs. Others settled down in front of the bathhouse. The rest crowded into the common room. Joran even sent Lomi out with tankards for the 3 infetters who had been left chained up in the back of their wagon. Washed and unwashed alike supped on hot pork pies and baked apples. The innkeeper gave them a round of beer on the house. I had a brother who took the black, years ago. Serving boy, clever. But one day he got seen filching pepper from my lord's table. He liked the taste of it, is all. Just a pinch of pepper. But Sir Malcolm was a hard man. You get pepper on the wall? When Jorn shook his head, the men sighed. Shame. Ling loved that pepper. Arya sipped at her tankard cautiously, between spoonfuls of pie still warm from the oven. Her father sometimes let them have a cup of beer, she remembered. Sansa used to make a face at the taste and say that wine was ever so much finer, but Arya had liked it well enough. It made her sad to think of Sansa and her father. The inn was full of people moving south, and the common room erupted in scorn when Jorn said they were travelling the other way. He'll be back soon enough, the innkeeper vowed. There's no going north. Half the fields are burned, and what folks are left are walled up inside their holdfasts. One bunch rides off at dawn, and another one shows up by dusk. That's nothing to us, Joran insisted stubbornly. Tully or Lannister makes no matter. The Watch takes no part. Lord Tully is my grandfather, Arya thought. It mattered to her, but she chewed her lip and kept quiet, listening. It's more than Lannister and Tully, the innkeeper said. There's wild men down from the mountains of the moon. Try telling them you take no part. And the Starks are in it too. The young lords come down, the Dead Hand's son. Arya sat up straight, straining to hear. Did he mean Robb? I heard the boy rides to battle on a wolf, said a yellow-haired man with a tankard in his hand. Fool's talk, Joran spat. The man I heard it from, he saw it himself. A wolf big as a horse, he swore. Swearing don't make it true hard, the innkeeper said. You keep swearing you'll pay what you owe me, and I've yet to see a copper. The common room erupted in laughter, and the man with the yellow hair turned red. It's been a bad year for wolves, volunteered a sallow man in a travel-stained green cloak. Around the God's Eye, the packs have grown bolder than anyone can remember. Sheep, cows, dogs, makes no matter. They kill as they like, and they got no fear of men. It's worth your life to go into those woods by night. That's more tales, and no more true than the other. I heard the same thing from my cousin, and she's not the sort to lie, an old woman said. She says there's this great pack, hundreds of them, man-killers. The one that leads them is a she-wolf, a bitch from the 7th hell. A she-wolf? Arya sloshed her beer, wondering. Was the God's Eye near the Trident? She wished she had a map. It had been near the Trident that she had left Nymeria. She hadn't wanted to, but Jory said they had no choice. That if the wolf came back with them, she'd be killing for biting Joffrey, even though he deserved it. They'd had to shout and scream and throw stones, and it wasn't until a few of Arya's stones struck home that the dire wolf had finally stopped following them. She probably wouldn't even know me now, Arya thought. Or if she did, she'd hate me. The man in the green cloak said, I heard how this hell bitch walked into a village one day. A market day, people everywhere, and she walks in bold as you please and tears a baby from his mother's arms. When the tale reached Lord Moota, him and his sons swore they'd put an end to her. They tracked her to a lair with a pack of wolfhounds, and barely escaped with their skins. Not one of those dogs came back. Not one. That's just a story, Arya blurted out before she could stop herself. Wolves don't eat babies. And what would you know about it, lad? Asked the man in the green cloak. Before she could think of an answer, Joran had her by the arm. The boy is green sick on beer, that's all it is. No, I am not. They don't eat babies. Outside, boy, and see that you stay there until you learn to shut your mouth when men are talking. He gave her a stiff shove toward the side door that led back to the stables. Go now. See that the stable boy has watered our horses. Arya went outside, stiff with fury. They don't, she muttered, picking at a rock as she stalked off. It went rolling and fetched up under the wagons. "Boy!" A friendly voice called out. "Lovely boy!" One of the men in irons was talking to her. Warily, Arya approached the wagon, one hand on Eagle's hilt. The prisoner lifted an empty tankard, his chains rattling. "A man could use another taste of beer. A man has a thirst wearing these heavy bracelets." He was the youngest of the three, slender, fine-featured, always smiling. His hair was red on one side and white on the other, all matted and filthy from cage and travel. "A man could use a bath too," he said when he saw the way Arya was looking at him. "A boy could make a friend." "I have friends," Arya said. "None I can see," said the one without a nose. He was squat and thick, with huge hands. Black hair covered his arms and legs and chest, even his back. He reminded Arya of a drawing she'd once seen in a book, of an ape from the Summer Isles. The hole in his face made it hard to look at him for long. The bald one opened his mouth and hissed like some immense white lizard. When Arya flinched back, startled, he opened his mouth wide and waggled his tongue at her, only it was more a stump than a tongue. "Stop that!" she blurted. "A man does not choose his companions in the black cells," the handsome one with the red and white hair said. Something about the way he talked reminded her of Syrian. It was the same, yet different too. "These two, they have no courtesy. A man must ask forgiveness. You're called Eri, is that not so?" "Lumpy-head," said the noseless one. "Lumpy-head, lumpy-faced stick boy. Have a care, Loreth, he'll hit you with his stick." "A man must be ashamed of the company he keeps, Eri," the handsome one said. "This man has the honor to be Jaqen Hagar, once of the free city of Loreth. Would that he were home. This man's ill-bred companions in captivity are named Rorge," he waved his tankard at the noseless men, "and Biter." Biter hissed at her again, displaying a mouthful of yellow teeth filed into points. "A man must have some name, is that not so? Biter cannot speak and Biter cannot write, yet his teeth are very sharp, so a man calls him Biter and he smiles. Are you charmed?" Arya backed away from the wagon. "No. They can't hurt me," she told herself. "They're all chained up." He turned his tankard upside down. "A man must weep." Rorge, the noseless one, flung his drinking cup at her with a curse. His manacles made him clumsy, yet even so he would have sent the heavy pewter tankard crashing into her head if Arya hadn't leapt aside. "You get us some beer, Pimple, now!" "You shut your mouth!" Arya tried to think what Ciri would have done. She drew her wooden and practiced sword. "Come closer," Rorge said, "and I'll shove that stick up your bungle and fuck you bloody." Fear cuts deeper than swords. Arya made herself approach the wagon. Every step was harder than the one before. Fierce as a wolverine, calm as still water. The words sang in her head. Ciri would have not been afraid. She was almost close enough to touch the wheel when Biter lurched to his feet and grabbed for her, his irons clanking and rattling. The manacles brought his hands up short, half a foot from her face. He hissed. She hit him, hard, right between his little eyes. Screaming, Biter reeled back, and then threw all his weight against his chains. The links slithered and turned and grew taut, and Arya heard the creak of old dry wood as the great iron rings strained against the floorboards of the wagon. Huge pale hands groped for her while veins bulged along Biter's arms, but the bonds held, and finally the man collapsed backward. Blood ran from the weeping sores on his cheeks. "A boy has more courage than sense," the one who had named himself Jaqen Hagar observed. Arya edged backward away from the wagon. When she felt the hand on her shoulder, she whirled, bringing up her stick sword again, but it was only the bull. "What are you doing?" He raised his hands defensively. "Yard said none of us should go near those three." "They don't scare me," Arya said. "Then you're stupid. They scare me." The bull's hand fell to the hilt of his sword, and Rorge began to laugh. "Let's get away from them." Arya scuffed at the ground with her foot, but she let the bull lead her around to the front of the inn. Roar's laughter and Biter's hissing followed them. Want to fight?
What do you know?
She asked the bull. She wanted to hit something. He blinked at her, startled. Strands of thick black hair, still wet from the bathhouse, fell across his deep blue eyes. I'd hurt you. You would not. You don't know how strong I am. You don't know how quick I am. You're asking for it, Ari. He drew Prad's longsword. This is cheap steel, but it's a real sword. Arya unsheathed needle. This is good steel, so it's realer than yours. The bull shook his head. Promise not to cry if I cut you? I'll promise if you will. She turned sideways into her water dancer stance, but the bull did not move. He was looking at something behind her. What's wrong? Gold cloaks. His face closed up tight. It couldn't be, Arya thought, but when she glanced back, they were riding up the King's Road, 6 in the black ringmail and golden cloaks of the city watch. One was an officer. He wore a black enameled breastplate ornamented with 4 golden discs. They drew up in front of the inn. Look with your eyes, Ciri's voice seemed to whisper. Her eyes saw white leather under their saddles. The horses had been ridden long and hard. Calm as still water, she took the bull by the arm and drew him back behind a tall flowering hedge. What is it? He asked. What are you doing? Let go. Quiet as a shadow, she whispered, pulling him down. Some of Yoren's other charges were sitting in front of the bathhouse, waiting their turn at the tub. You men! One of the gold cloaks shouted. You the ones left to take the black? We might be, came the cautious answer. We'd rather join you boys, old Raisin said. We hear it's cold on that wall. The gold cloak officer dismounted. I have a warrant for a certain boy. Yoren stepped out of the inn, fingering his tangled black beard. Who is it wants this boy? The other gold cloaks were dismounting to stand beside their horses. Why are we hiding? The bull whispered. It's me they want, Arya whispered back. His ears smelled of soap. You be quiet. The queen wants him, old man. Not that it's your concern, the officer said, drawing a ribbon from his belt. Here, Her Grace's seal and warrant. Behind the hedge, the bull shook his head doubtfully. Why would the queen want you, Ari? She punched his shoulder. Be quiet. Yoren fingered the warrant ribbon with its blob of golden wax. Pretty, he spit. Thing is, the boy's in the Night's Watch now. What he done back in the city don't mean piss all. The queen's not interested in your views, old man, and neither am I, the officer said. I'll have the boy. Arya thought about running, but she knew she wouldn't get far on her donkey when the gold cloaks had horses. And she was so tired of running. She'd run when Sir Meryn came for her, and again when they killed her father. If she was a real water dancer, she would go out there with Needle and kill all of them, and never run from anyone ever again. You'll have no one, Yoren said stubbornly. There's laws on such things. The gold cloak drew a short sword. Here's your law. Yoren looked at the blade. That's no law, just a sword. Happens I got one too. The officer smiled. Old fool, I have 5 men with me. Yoren spat. Happens I got 30. The gold cloak laughed. This lot? Said a big lout with a broken nose. Who's first? He shouted, showing his steel. Taba plucked a pitchfork out of a bale of hay. I am. No, I am, called Kachak, the plump stonemason, pulling his hammer off the leather apron he always wore. Me. Curse came up off the ground with his skinning knife in hand. Me and him. Koth strung his longbow. All of us, said Raisin, snatching up the tall hardwood walking staff he carried. Dobber stepped naked out of the bathhouse with his clothes in a bundle, saw what was happening, and dropped everything but his dagger. Is it a fight? He asked. I guess, said Hot Pie, scrambling on all fours for a big rock to throw. Arya could not believe what she was seeing. She hated Hot Pie. Why would he risk himself for her? The one with the broken nose still thought it was funny. You girls put away them rocks and sticks before you get spanked. None of you knows what end of a sword to hold. I do! Arya wouldn't let them die for her like Sirio. She wouldn't. Shoving through the hedge with needle in hand, she slid into a water dancer's stance. Broken Nose guffawed. The officer looked her up and down. Put the blade away, little girl. No one wants to hurt you. I'm not a girl, she yelled, furious. What was wrong with them? They rode all this way for her, and here she was, and they were just smiling at her. I'm the one you want. He's the one we want. The officer jabbed his short sword toward the bull, who'd come forward to stand beside her, Pratt's cheap steel in his hand. But it was a mistake to take his eyes off Yoren, even for an instant. Quick as that, the black brother's sword was pressed to the apple of the officer's throat. Neither's the one you get, lest you want me to see if your apple's ripe yet. I got me 10, 15 more brothers in that inn, if you still need convincing. I was you, I'd let loose of that gut cutter, spread my cheeks over that fat little horse, and gallop on back to the city. He spat and poked harder with the point of his sword. Now. The officer's fingers uncurled. His sword fell in the dust. We'll just keep that, Yoren said. Good steel's always needed on the wall. As you say. For now, men. The gold cloak sheathed and mounted up. You'd best scamper up to that wall of yours in a hurry, old man. The next time I catch you, I believe I'll have your head to go with the bastard boys. Better men than you have tried. Yoren slapped the rump of the officer's horse with the flat of his sword and sent him reeling off down the King's Road. His men followed. When they were out of sight, Hot Pie began to whoop, but Yoren looked angrier than ever. Fool! You think he's done with us? Next time he won't prance up and hand me no damn ribbon. Get the rest out of them baths, we need to be moving. Ride all night, maybe we can stay ahead of them for a bit. He scooped up the short sword the officer had dropped. Who wants this? Me! Hot Pie yelled. Don't be using it on Eri. He handed the boy the sword, hilt first, and walked over to Arya, but it was the bull he spoke to. Queen wants you bad, boy. Arya was lost. Why would she want him? The bull scowled at her. Why would she want you? You're nothing but a little gutter rat. Well, you're nothing but a bastard boy. Or maybe he was only pretending to be a bastard boy. What's your true name? Gendry, he said, like he wasn't quite sure. Don't see why no one wants neither of you, Yoren said. But they can't have you regardless. You ride them 2 courses. First side of Gold Cloak, make for the wall like a dragon's on your tail. The rest of us don't mean spit to them. Except for you, Arya pointed out. That man said he'd take your head too. Well, as to that, Yoren said. If he can get it on my shoulders, he's welcome to it. Chapter 6. John. Sam? John called softly. The air smelled of paper and dust and gears. Before him, tall wooden shelves rose up into dimness, crammed with leather-bound books and bins of ancient scrolls. A faint yellow glow filtered through the stacks from some hidden lamp. John blew out the paper he carried, preferring not to risk an open flame amidst so much old dry paper. Instead, he followed the light, wending his way down a narrow aisle beneath barrel-vaulted ceilings. All in black, he was a shadow among shadows, dark of hair, long of face, grey of eye. Black moleskin gloves covered his hands. The right because it was burnt, the left because a man felt half a fool wearing only one glove. Samuel Tarley sat hunched over a table in a niche carved into the stone of the wall. The glow came from the lamp hung over his head. He looked up at the sound of John's steps. Have you been here all night? Have I? Sam looked startled. You didn't break your fast with us, then your bed hadn't been slept in. Rast suggested that maybe Sam had deserted, but John never believed it. Desertion required its own sort of courage, and Sam had little enough of that. Is it morning? Down here, there's no way to know. Sam, you're a sweet fool, John said. You'll miss that bad when we're sleeping on the cold hot ground, I promise you. Sam yawned. Master Raymond sent me to find maps for the Lord Commander. I never thought... John, the books, have you ever seen their like? There are thousands. He gazed about him. The library at Winterfell has more than 100. Did you find the maps? Oh, yes. Sam's hand swept over the table, fingers plump as sausages, indicating the clutter of books and scrolls before him. A dozen at the least. He unfolded a square of parchment. The paint is faded, but you can see where the map marker marked the sites of wildling villages. And there's another book. Where is it now? I was reading it a moment ago. He shoved some scrolls aside to reveal a dusty volume bound in rotted leather. This, he said reverently, is the account of a journey from the Shadow Tower all the way to Lawn Point on the frozen shore, written by a ranger named Redwyn. It's not dated, but he mentions a Doran Stark as king in the north, so it must be from before the conquest. John, they found giants. Redwyn even traded with the children of the forest. It's all here. Ever so delicately, he turned pages with a finger. He drew maps as well, see? Maybe you could write an account of our ranging, Sam. He'd meant to sound encouraging, but it was the wrong thing to say. The last thing Sam needed was to be reminded of what faced him on the morrow. He shuffled the scrolls about aimlessly. There's more maps. If I had time to search, everything's a jumble. I could set it all to order, though. I know I could, but it would take time. Well, years, in truth. Mormont wanted those maps a little sooner than that. John plucked a scroll from a bin, blew off the worst of the dust. A corner flaked off between his fingers as he unrolled it. Look, this one's crumbling, he said, frowning over the faded script. Be gentle. Sam came around the table and took the scroll from his hand, holding it as if it were a wounded animal. The important books used to be copied over when they needed them. Some of the oldest have been copied 100 times, probably. Well, don't bother copying that one. 23 barrels of pickled cod, 18 jars of fish oil, a cask of salt. An inventory, Sam said. Or perhaps a bill of sale. Who cares how much pickled cod they ate 600 years ago? John wondered. I would. Sam carefully replaced the scroll in the bin from which John had plucked it. You can learn so much from legends like that, truly you can. It can tell you how many men were in the Night's Watch then, how they lived, what they ate. They ate food, said John, and they lived as we live. You'd be surprised. This vault is a treasure, John. If you say so. John was doubtful. Treasure meant gold, silver, and jewels, not dust, spiders, and rotting leather. I do, the fat boy blurted. He was older than young, a man grown by law, but it was hard to think of him as anything but a boy. I found drawings of the faces in the trees, and a book about the tongue of the children of the forest. Works that even the Citadel doesn't have. Scrolls from old Valyria, accounts of the season written by masters dead 1,000 years. The books will still be here when we return. If we return. The old bear is taking 200 seasoned men, 3/4 of them rangers. Corin Hoffman will be bringing another 100 brothers from the Shadow Tower. You'll be as safe as if you were back in your Lord Father's castle at Horn Hill. Samuel Tarley managed a sad little smile. I was never very safe in my father's castle either. The gods play cruel jests, John thought. Pip and Toad, all laddered to be part of the Great Ranging, were to remain at Castle Black. It was Samuel Tarley, the self-proclaimed coward, grossly fat, timid, and near as bad as rider as he was with his sword, who must face the haunted forest. The old bear was taking 2 cages of ravens, so they might send back word as they went. Master Raymond was blind and far too frail to ride with them, so his steward must go in his place. We need you for the ravens, Sam, and someone has to help me keep Gren humble. Sam's chins quivered. You could care for the ravens, or Gren could, or anyone. He said with a thin edge of desperation in his voice. I could show you how. You know your letters too. You could write down Lord Mormont's messages as well as I. I'm the old bear steward. I'll need to squire for him, tend his horse, set up his tent. I won't have time to watch over birds as well. Sam, you said the words. You're a brother of the Night's Watch now. A brother of the Night's Watch shouldn't be so scared. We're all scared. We'd be fooled if we weren't. Too many rangers have been lost the past 2 years, even Benjamin Stark, John's uncle. They had found 2 of his uncle's men in the wood, slain, but the corpses had risen in the chill of night. John's burned fingers twitched as he remembered. He still saw the white in his dreams, that Otho with the burning blue eyes and the cold black hands, but that was the last thing Sam needed to be reminded of. There is no shame in fear, my father told me. What matters is how we face it. Come, I'll help you gather up the maps. Sam nodded unhappily. The shelves were so closely spaced that they had to walk single file as they left. The vault opened into one of the tunnels the brothers called the Wormwalks, winding subterranean passages that linked the keeps and towers of Castle Black under the earth. In summer, the Wormwalks were seldom used, save by rats and other vermin, but winter was a different matter. When the snows drifted 40 and 50 feet high and the ice winds came howling out the north, the tunnels were all that held Castle Black together. Soon, John thought as they climbed. It seemed the harbinger that had come to Master Raymond with word of Summer's End, the great raven of the citadel, white and silent as ghost. He had seen a winter once when he was very young, but everyone agreed that it had been a short one and mild. This one would be different. He could feel it in his bones. Steep stone steps had Sam puffing like a blacksmith's bellows by the time they reached the surface. They emerged into a brisk wind that made John's cloak swirl and snap. Ghost was stretched out asleep beneath the wattle and daub wall of the granary, but he woke when John appeared, bushy white tail held stiffly upright as he trotted to them. Sam squinted up at the wall. It loomed above them, an icy cliff 700 feet high. Sometimes it seemed to John almost a living thing, with moods of its own. The color of the ice was to change with every shift of the light. Now it was the deep blue of frozen rivers, now the dirty white of old snow, and when a cloud passed before the sun, it darkened to the pale gray of pitted stone. The walls stretched east and west as far as the eye could see, so huge that it shrunk the timbered keeps and stone towers of the castle to insignificance. It was the end of the world. And we are going beyond it. The morning sky was streaked by thin grey clouds, but a pale red line was there behind them. The Black Brothers had dubbed the Wanderer Morning's torch, saying that the gods must have sent it to light the old man's way through the haunted forest. The comet's so bright you can see it by daylight, Sam said, shading his eyes with a fistful of books. Never mind about comets. It's maps the old bear wants. Ghost loped ahead of them. The ground seemed deserted this morning, with so many rangers off at the Rodel in North Town, digging for buried treasure and drinking themselves blind. Gren had gone with them. Pip and Halder and Toad had offered to buy him his first woman to celebrate his first ranging. They'd wanted John and Sam to come as well, but Sam was almost as frightened of horrors as he was of the haunted forest, and John had wanted no part of it. Do what you want, he told Toad. I took a while. As they passed the set, he heard voices raised in songs. Some men want whores in lieu of battle, and some want gods. John wondered who felt better afterward. The sap tempted him no more than the Broden. His own gods kept their temples in the wild places, where the weirwoods spread their bone-white branches. The Seven have no power beyond the wall, he thought, but my gods will be waiting. Outside the armory, Sir Andrew Todd was working with some raw recruits. They'd come in last night with Conry, one of the wandering crows who roamed the Seven Kingdoms collecting men for the wall. This new crop consisted of a grey beard leaning on a staff, 2 blonde boys with the look of brothers, a foppish youth in salt satin, a raggy man with a clubbed foot, and some grinning loon who must have fancied himself a warrior. Sir Andrew was showing him the error of that presumption. He was a gentler master-at-arms than Sir Alistair Thorne had been, but his lessons would still raise bruises. Sam winced every blow, but Jon Snow watched the swordplay closely. What do you make of them, Snow? Donald Noy stood in the door of his armory, bare-chested under a leather apron, the stump of his left arm uncovered for once. With his big gut and barrel chest, his flat nose and bristly black jaw, Noy did not make a pretty sight, but he was a welcome one nonetheless. The armorer had proved himself a good friend. They smell of summer, John said as Sir Andrew ball-rushed his foe and knocked him sprawling. Where did Conwy find them? A lord's dungeon near Gultown, the smith replied. A brigand, a barber, a beggar, 2 orphans and a boy whore. With such do we defend the realms of men. They'll do. John gave Sam a private smile. We did. Noy drew him closer. You've heard these tidings of your brother? Last night. Conwy and his charges had brought the news north with them, and the talk in the common room had been of little else. John was still not certain how he felt about it. Rob a king? The brother he'd played with, fought with, shared his first cup of wine with. But not mother's milk, no. So now Rob will sip summer wine from jeweled goblets, while I'm kneeling beside some streams sucking snowmelt from cupped hands. Rob will make a good king, he said loyally. Will he now? The smith eyed him frankly. I hope that's so, boy, but once I might have said the same of Robert. They say you forged his warhammer, John remembered. Aye, I was his man, a Baratheon man, smith and armourer at Storm's End until I lost the arm. I'm old enough to remember Lord Stephen before the sea took him, and I knew those 3 sons of his since they got their names. I tell you this, Robert was never the same after he put on that crown. Some men are like swords, made for fighting. Hang them up, and they go to rust. And his brothers? John asked. The armourer considered that a moment. Robert was the true steel. Stannis is pure iron, black and hard and strong, yes, but brittle, the way iron gets. He'll break before he bends. And Renly, that one, he's copper, bright and shiny, pretty to look at, but not worth all that much at the end of the day. And what metal is Rob? John did not ask. Noy was a Baratheon man. Likely he thought Joffrey the lawful king and Rob a traitor. Among the Brotherhood of the Night's Watch, there was an unspoken pact never to probe too deeply into such matters. Men came to the wall from all of the 7 kingdoms, and old loves and loyalties were not easily forgotten, no matter how many oaths a man swore, as John himself had good reason to know. Even Sam, his father's house was sworn to High Garden, whose Lord Tyrell supported King Renly. Best not to talk of such things. The Night's Watch took no sides. Lord Mormont awaits us, John said. I won't keep you from the old bear. Noy clapped him on the shoulder and smiled. May the gods go with you on the morrow, Snow. You bring back that uncle of yours, you hear? We will, John promised him. Lord Commander Mormont had taken up residence in the King's Tower after the fire had gutted his own. John left Ghost with the guards outside the door. More stairs, said Sam miserably as they started up. I hate stairs. Well, that's one thing we won't face in the wood. When they entered the Sala, the raven spied them at once. Snow! The bird shrieked. Mormont broke off his conversation. Took you long enough with those maps. He pushed the remains of breakfast out of the way to make room on the table. Put them there. I'll have a look at them later. Thorin Smallwood, a sinewy ranger with a weak chin and a weaker mouth hidden under a thin scraggle of beard, gave John and Sam a cool look. He had been one of Alistair Thorne's henchmen and had no love for either of them. The Lord Commander's place is at Castle Black, lording and commanding, he told Mormont, ignoring the newcomers. It seems to me. The raven flapped big black wings. If you are ever Lord Commander, you may do as you please, Mormont told the ranger. But it seems to me that I have not died yet, nor have the brothers put you in my place. I'm first ranger now with Ben Stark lost and Sir Jeremy killed, Smallwood said stubbornly. The command should be mine. Mormont would have none of it. I sent out Ben Stark and Sir Waymar before him. I do not mean to send you after them and sit wondering how long I must wait before I give you up for lost as well. He pointed. And Stark remains first ranger until we know for a certainty that he's dead. Should that day come, it will be me who names his successor, not you. Now stop wasting my time. We ride at first light, or have you forgotten? Smallwood pushed to his feet. As my lord commands. On the way out, he frowned at John, as if it were somehow his fault. First ranger. The old bear's eyes lightened on Sam. I'd sooner name you first ranger. He has the effrontery to tell me to my face that I'm too old to ride with him. Do I look old to you, boy? The hare that had retreated from Mormont's spotted scalp had regrouped beneath his chin in a shaggy grey beard that covered much of his chest. He thumped it hard. Do I look frail? Sam opened his mouth, gave a little squeak. The old bear terrified him. No, my lord, John offered quickly. You look strong as a... Don't cousin me, Snow. You know I won't have it. Let me have a look at these maps. Mormont pawed through them briskly, giving each no more than a glance and a grunt. Was this all you could find? My lord, Sam stammered. There were more, but this... Order. These are old, Mormont complained, and his raven echoed him with a sharp cry of old, old. The villages may come and go, but the hills and rivers will be in the same places, John pointed out. True enough. Have you chosen your ravens yet, Tarly? Master Raymond means to pick them come even fall, after the feeding. I'll have his best, smart birds, and strong. Strong, his own bird said, preening. If it happens that we're all butchered out there, I mean for my successor to know where and how we died. Talk of butchery reduced Samuel Tarly to speechlessness. Mormont leaned forward. Tarly, when I was a lad half your age, my lady mother told me that if I stood about with my mouth open, a weasel was like to mistake it for his lair and run down my throat. If you have something to say, say it.
毎日マスクをするようになって一つ気づいたことがある。今マスクの中がすっごく気になる。なあ。
Otherwise, beware of weasels. He waved a brisk dismissal. Off with you. I'm too busy for folly. No doubt the master has some work you can do. Sam swallowed, stepped back, and scurried out so quickly he almost tripped over the rushes. Is that boy as big a fool as he seems? The Lord Commander asked when he'd gone. Fool! The raven complained. Mormont did not wait for John to answer. His Lord Father stands high in King Renly's council, and I'd have a notion to dispatch him. No, best not. Renly is not like to heed a quaking fat boy. I'll send Sir Arnell. He's a deal steadier, and his mother was one of the Green Apple Fossaways. If it please my lord, what would you have of King Renly? The same things I'd have of all them, lad. Men, horses, swords, armor, grain, cheese, wine, wool, nails. The Night's Watch is not proud. We take what is offered. His fingers drummed against the rough-hewn planks of the table. If the winds have been kind, Sir Alistair should reach King's Landing by the turn of the moon. But whether this boy Joffrey will pay him any heed, I do not know. House Lannister has never been a friend to the Watch. Thorn has the White's hand to show them. A grisly pale thing with black fingers it was, that twitched and stirred in its jar as if it were still alive. Would that we had another hand to send to Renly. Tywin says you can find anything beyond the wall. Aye, Tywin says. The last time he went ranging he says he saw a bear 15 feet tall. Mormon snorted. My sister is said to have taken a bear for her lover. I'd believe that before I'd believe one 15 feet tall. Though in a world where dead come walking... even so, a man must believe his eyes. I have seen the dead walk. I have not seen any giant bears. He gave John a long searching look.
And a map.
We were speaking of hands.
I don't even know
How
if
is
I'm going to put
yours?
this on YouTube. It's not really much
Better.
point.
John
Read it
pulled
to
out
my
a small
phone.
skin glove and showed him.
And I don't think
Scar
YouTube's going to
covered
like
around halfway to the elbow.
me listening to
The
Game of
muscle
Thrones.
pink
But
flesh
whatever.
still felt tight and tender. but it was
See you next
real.
time. Bye.
It had